In this video, I want to look at the structures of the torso as far as digestive system is concerned. Now in this model, we can only see a little bit of the esophagus coming down in the back. They didn't do a very good job of depicting the esophagus. So I'm going to pick it up from the diaphragm on down. On the upper right side, mostly in the right hypochondriac region, we see the liver, and we've seen liver on a different video already. So here we can see the liver on the upper right quadrant of the abdominal cavity, and hidden a little bit by the liver we can see part of the stomach. I'm going to remove the liver in this model, and we can see the stomach where it was attaching to the esophagus as we came through the esophageal hiatus. And here we can see the body of the stomach. From this angle, mostly the body. You see a little bit of the fundus and the cardia region, and we can see the pylorus, the pyloric antrum, heading over to the pyloric sphincter and the duodenum. Now if I open the stomach, we can see inside the stomach many folds known as rugae. We can see where the esophagus entered the stomach, the region known as the cardia of the stomach. The area a little bit higher than the esophagus, known as the fundus of the stomach. The main body of the stomach with its rugae. Then the pyloric antrum leading over to the pyloric sphincter of the stomach. From there we pass into the small intestine. However, you cannot see the small intestine initially. If you're looking at the digestive system as a whole, we have transverse colon passing in front. So I'm going to remove some of these structures and then place them back on in just a second. So I'll remove the stomach, and I'm going to remove this portion of the large intestine, and I can see that the stomach was then attaching here to the first portion of the small intestine known as the duodenum. The duodenum will pass posteriorly and toward the right and then turn and come back across toward the left. The duodenum is retroperitoneal. It is fused to the posterior body wall, and it is forming a large C-shaped loop over this structure known as the pancreas. Now I'm going to remove a major portion of the small intestine on the model so we can see the duodenum coming around a C-shaped loop, and then right here the duodenum leaves the posterior abdominal wall and comes forward. At that point, it is no longer the duodenum. At that point, it has now become what we call the jejunum. I'm going to put the remainder of the small intestine back into the model, and we can see the jejunum as it takes a twisting, winding curve through the abdominal cavity. The upper the upper 2/5 of this portion that I've just removed will be jejunum. The lower 3/5 will be the ileum. All of that is small intestine. So the three regions of our small intestine will be the duodenum, then the jejunum, and then lower down we will have the ileum. I'll put this back on the model here again in just a moment. When we get to the end of the ileum, we then meet with the first portion of the large intestine, or the colon, known as the cecum. It is a bag-like region on the lower right portion of the abdomen. And here we can see the ileum meeting the cecum, and inside we have a valve known as the ileocecal valve. The ileocecal valve prevents backflow of matter from our large intestine into our small intestine. Also we can see off of the cecum, here they've made it in green, the structure known as the vermiform appendix. The vermiform appendix. Then we will pass up the right side of the abdominal cavity as the ascending colon. Now when the ascending colon gets to the upper quadrant where it meets the liver, it turns and it will come across in front of the rest of the abdominal structures, and it does that as the transverse colon. Where the colon took a bend at the liver, we call it either the right colic flexure or the hepatic flexure. Remember, hepatic means liver. Then we pass in front of all of the other abdominal structures as the transverse colon. Then when the transverse colon gets to the left side of the body, it runs into an organ known as the spleen. On this model, the spleen is attached to the bottom of the lung that I already removed, so we don't get to see the spleen. And then we turn, and we call that either the splenic flexure, or because it's on the left side of the body, the left colic flexure. And we turn and we go down as the descending colon, And then when we get to the lower left abdominal cavity, we make an S-shaped turn in what is called the sigmoid colon, and then we dive straight down as the rectum. If I remove this portion of the digestive tract from the model, we get a better view of the sigmoid colon and the rectum. Now I'm going to put this back in for just a moment, and then we'll talk about blood vessels to some of these structures. But I want to put all of the small intestine back on again, because without the small intestine, we cannot see that transverse colon in its natural position. So here we see the transverse colon, and the entire length of the large intestine, starting at the cecum and running all the way through to the rectum. The colon will have longitudinal bands of smooth muscle. There are actually 3 of them, but you can only see 1 at any time. These are known as tinea coli. Also notice that the large intestine is divided in these little lobulations. Each one of those is known as a haustra. A haustra. This model shows one other thing that none of our other models show, and it only shows half of it. This is a fatty connective tissue sheath known as the greater omentum. Now this model had to use some artistic license. The greater omentum actually connects to the greater curvature of the stomach, and it hangs down in front of the transverse colon and small intestine and doubles back on itself to insert into the transverse colon. So if we initially open your abdominal cavity, you do not get to see the transverse colon and the small intestine. There should be an apron of fat in front known as the greater omentum. So the structures that we should see digestive-wise in this torso model, we have the liver. We can see a little bit of the esophagus. Esophagus coming into the stomach. We already reviewed the different regions of the stomach. From the stomach we pass into the duodenum. Also some people pronounce duodenum. Unless we remove the other structures, we cannot see the duodenum making its C-shaped loop around the head of the pancreas. From duodenum we go to jejunum, then ileum, work our way over to the right where we meet the cecum, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and the associated curves.